Generative AI empowers people to do a lot more with a lot less. It does so much of the heavy lifting and can draft a really thoughtful, cohesive piece of content, whether it's an email, a blog post, a social media post, etc. And then, of course, really getting a pair of human eyes on that to make sure that that content is on brand. And it allows content teams to operate at a scale that they simply have never been able to do before.
The upcoming companies, the underdogs, the people who don't have a lot of budget, if they define their ideal customer profile in a more specific manner, all their content is about that specific service, specific product, specific ICP, I think they will have better chances at appearing in the results of these LLMs.
All of the big powerhouse platforms, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, HubSpot, all of them are incorporating AI into their DNA.
Ben Brown, good to have you on the program.
Naja, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, so you are a marketing and strategy executive for AI and B2B SaaS. How does marketing for SaaS and B2B different from regular B2C?
Yeah, big differences between B2B and B2C. When you're marketing to a consumer, it's typically much more of an impulse buy, of course, depending on the price of the product. Obviously, people aren't going to buy a car on a whim, but if you're selling makeup or soap or candy bars, laundry detergent, typically ways to reach consumers, immediately spark the interest, get them to buy immediately or on their next visit to the store. Marketing to businesses, entirely different animal. Sales cycles are typically a whole heck of a lot longer than the microseconds that it would take a consumer to buy a candy bar. Depending on the type of product or service you're selling, selling to a business will likely be selling to much more than one person. You're not selling to the head of the household or children to pass along to their parents, what have you. You might be selling, in the case of my last venture, to a hospital CFO who was going to be working in tandem with 6 to 7 people across different teams, from IT to operations to, even marketing and people. So it's about really understanding the complex nature of not just your buyer, but your buying committee, understanding the different steps of the sales cycle that it will really take, and that just hitting them once is probably not enough. You're probably going to have to hit them dozens of times before they're inclined to make a sale. So those would be some of the really key differences when you're, marketing B2B SaaS versus, a B2C product.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there's many stakeholders. Yes, there might be the CFO or the CEO as the key decision maker, but then there's also a lot of the committees, as you mentioned, the different stakeholders within the department, and then you need to get all these buy-ins from different key people in different departments. How do you manage those cycles, or how do you manage those buy-ins? How do you get them? Let's say you started the work. Walk me through that process.
The first step is certainly understanding your customer. And when I say your customer, I mean understanding the entire buying committee. So walking in, I would recommend for any marketing leader to go on a listening tour, to be working hand in hand with the sales team to, one, get direct feedback and high-level feedback from the sales team about who the different members of the committee are and what best appeals to them. For example, when you're selling AI, you're going to want to appeal to the executive level to say, how does our AI help you make money, save money, and grow? Whereas for like a manager of a team that will be using that AI product, okay, how is our AI going to help improve the quality of life for your team and for you to personally manage them? How is it going to, address the gorilla in the room of job security? Okay, this AI is actually enhancing people's productivity and keeping them in their jobs longer rather than the other way around. Working with heads of IT to talk about ease of implementation, talking about cost of implementation, talking about security, privacy, and compliance, all really heavy-hitting issues. Then sitting in maybe on some sales calls. I wouldn't say maybe, definitely sitting in on some sales calls, or utilizing a great tool like Gong to catch up if it's not in real time. But to see the immediate reactions and the discussions and all of the supplementary material that you're not going to get in like a single high level overview with your sales team. See your product being sold in the wild and understand what are the gaps that a great marketing leader can address, whether it's in terms of messaging from a product standpoint, in terms of content creation and sales enablement, and how you reach each segment of the buying committee with the right content and the right messaging at the right times.
You've mentioned offline to me that AI is as foundational as CRM systems back in the years. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, so steering more toward AI within the marketing function. So generative AI has, of course, made an explosive impact in just about every sector out there. Within the marketing realm, generative AI has become such an essential tool for content creation, where now even with a fully staffed content team, doesn't matter how big your organization is, generative AI empowers people to do a lot more with a lot less. It does so much of the heavy lifting and can draft a really thoughtful, cohesive piece of content, whether it's an email, a blog post, a social media post, etc. And then, of course, really getting a pair of human eyes on that to make sure that content is on brand. And it allows content teams to operate at a scale that they simply have never been able to do before. I'm seeing the same sort of pattern with generative AI as it pertains to content as we saw with CRM or customer relationship management systems as they entered the sales marketing world, a couple of decades ago. If you talk to any established brand and they're not working with a Salesforce or a HubSpot or some equivalent, then you're going to, have some questions in the back of your mind. How are you organizing your CRM? Like, where is your infrastructure? I think in the not too distant future, a generative AI tool is going to be an equally critical part of that tech stack. Not saying that it needs to be, extremely cohesive and advanced, but that it will simply be a critical part of a marketing team, and that marketers will rely on generative AI for their content and probably much more in the same way that they rely on a CRM system for really keeping everything in place.
It's interesting that you say that, and I like the analogy of the impact of CRM systems. I remember when CRMs become popular, how everybody's running. It's like everybody's rushing to adopt them. But the question here is, do you think that AI solutions gonna be on top of the existing tools, and then we're gonna keep seeing the legacy tools being used, like HubSpot and the Salesforce and all of them, but with additional generative AI functionality? Or do you think there are gonna be some new tools out there that are gonna come and take their place? Just that we saw that in many different areas where, OpenAI is one example. Now it's a company from nobody heard about it before, just came in and taking on the legacy of Google, to some degree. But what do you think the future is going to look like? Is it going to be the same tools but powered with AI? We're also seeing the Copilot and stuff. We're going to see completely different new tools being adopted in the business world.
I think it's going to be a mix of both. All of the big powerhouse platforms, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, HubSpot, you name it, all of them are incorporating AI into their DNA. You have, Google Gemini, you have Microsoft Copilot, Salesforce has their own generative AI stuff. I brought Gong up a couple of minutes ago. Gong has an incredible AI tool that allows one to really dissect and just uncover key insights from different conversations at lightning speed. So if a legacy tool isn't incorporating AI into its functionality, then they're in serious trouble. But I honestly don't think that that's the case, because they all have the savvy to know what the future holds. So at the same time, I think that there is certainly a lot of room for a number of newcomers to, enter the arena as an additional supplementary tool that's not necessarily within the core competencies that you'll find in the legacy tools. So Perplexity, I think, is a great example. Perplexity is a generative AI tool that's really good for market research and uncovering some key information about your ideal customer profile or ICP. And I've incorporated Perplexity into, my general tactical plan. And it's just a great layer that sits on top of your pre-existing items. Because Perplexity and tools like Perplexity, no, I'm not being paid by Perplexity to say this. I just really enjoy their functionality. They just provide a service that you just simply didn't have before. So it's just one more tool in your toolkit that you're able to use. And there will inevitably be some consolidation. There's going to be a lot of M&A over the coming years where these niche tools are absorbed at probably, pretty enviable price tag by these legacy systems so that the bigger players can keep getting bigger. I will leave it at that. But I really think that there's going to be some combination of the two, and that whoever is utilizing AI the best to truly serve brands' needs and add value, they are going to go far.
That's very interesting what you said in the preparation of this episode about how leaders are rushing for content automation, where you're saying that we need more augmentation. Please talk more about that.
Absolutely. So much of the AI hype wave is revolving around automation, sort of this set it and forget it mentality where you can essentially click a button and have a machine do your job for you. At the very, very rudimentary levels, that could be a possibility. But when it comes to something like content creation, I have explored countless tools that are supposedly, generative AI for on-brand marketing material. I haven't found a single one that comes even remotely close to generating material that I would approve as on-brand as a marketing leader. What I am finding in both the realm of, the marketing function, as well as, the AI companies that I have represented, are that augmented tools are really where so much value is being captured right now. And when I say augmentation, I'm referring to the process of AI doing a lot of heavy lifting and essentially doing a lot of busy work to get a project from 0 to 1, and then enabling a team member to take that rough cut from the AI and refine it using their own expertise. So in the case of let's just say a copywriter, copywriter needs to do a 1,000-word blog post. They can prompt AI to get a pretty good first draft in. And, that saves what could be hours and hours of work. And from there, refining that draft to be on brand, of course, fact checking it, making sure that everything is represented legally, ethically, and factually, and that the material is delivered in the brand's voice. Now, that's a really critical element of a copywriter. Doing the draft can be the longest part of the job. I know that from experience. But being able to use generative AI and really have that superpower to basically get that draft almost instantaneously and being able to create on-brand content from there just makes a world of difference. I want to include the very, very large caveat that they're calling it prompt engineering. That term could shift over time, but the act of generating that draft is an art in and of itself. And I think that's going to be a very critical skill set for content creators and marketing leaders to have really from here on out. And that anyone can simply say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a 1,000-word blog post about XYZ, and you'll get a very generic cookie cutter response. But being able to really understand how to coax the AI into giving you the information that you would otherwise write yourself, based on your own, industry expertise, conversations that you had with stakeholders, et cetera. That is a really key component that content teams should have and should be looking for in the team members that join them, because that's going to be an essential change that really reworks how marketing teams operate.
Yeah, that's super critical. I'm like you, I totally agree. You start with AI, first draft, and usually it's far from what the main outcome, what you really want to achieve. I think until we have a tool that literally can crawl the web or get all the tone of voice and the little, what makes our writing style very special, and then integrating that into a kind of a voice or a tone of voice that is very close to how we write as humans. Until then, I think we definitely need to see AI as a first draft and then build on top of it. And we're seeing a lot of prompt engineers, especially I think in the image generation department, because this is an area where I definitely lack a lot of skill in there, because I try to generate images with my regular natural language prompts, and it's usually not as good as I see some people on LinkedIn, for example, especially creative directors and people who are artists in themselves. They even know how to prompt these models in a way to generate completely different outcome that what I would generate. And I think in the future, this skill set that you mentioned is going to be proven by the work that is being done. So we're not going to see a test or a kind of an assessment of your AI skills. We're just going to see the same work that you've done. If you're a copywriter, we're going to look at your writing. We don't care whether you use AI or not. We're just going to look at how much productive you are, how much you produce in terms of outcome, and the quality of this writing. If you're in a visual art industry, you want to produce like designs, we're going to look at your designs. We don't really care whether you use AI or not. So I think the assessment, how we assess those skills, is going to be critical, because how would you prove that you're a good prompt engineer, for example?
Well, I think that you might have even answered your own question in that description in saying, we don't care whether you used generative AI or not. It will be a matter of use generative AI to create, XYZ, and be able, and just the asset will speak for itself. So you could have spent, an extra 4 hours drafting a blog post. You could have spent an extra, 45 minutes, creating all the necessary frameworks for an infographic, or you could have spent, a couple of minutes just prompting the AI, and it'll spit out what it spits out. And okay, cool. If you're asking for projects at scale, so all right, I need 10 infographics. Can you get them to me by end of day? Most designers would say, are you out of your mind? But someone who is really well versed in prompt engineering, be like, all right, I'll get them to you before breakfast. There's a lot of training that goes into that, right? In the same way that a really experienced designer is going to make, a graphic from scratch that a less experienced designer, it would take them 2 weeks to do the same thing. Prompt engineering, someone who is really well versed in how to correctly prompt AI based on the brand voice and the deliverable, like they're going to pump out A+ quality content in a minimal amount of time. Whereas someone who's still getting their feet wet, it's going to take them a couple tries.
Absolutely. And it all starts from earlier than this request. Let me explain. So if you're a designer or a copywriter, the preparation that you do beforehand, the GPTs that you create, let's say if you're using ChatGPT, you create all these GPTs, you insert your knowledge bases, you have these ready-made prompts that you can tweak. All of this will add to the time saving that you do. All of this you don't have to reconstruct the wheel, give the same context over and over again. So the preparation that goes before that, you're kind of building your identity as a designer or as a writer beforehand using all these tools. And then you are ready whenever you have tasks, you can produce at scale. But speaking of content, the reason why we produce content is big part of it is for SEO. And now we're seeing people are not going to Google anymore to ask questions. They're going to ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. So now the question becomes, how can we optimize our services and products so that we are discoverable on these platforms.
Yeah, the entire concept of search is being reinvented with generative AI. You've probably noticed that when you go to type in a question on Google, that you're not necessarily getting like the traditional blurb that you had gotten, a year or two ago. You're not getting like sponsored results at the top always. You're getting a Gemini output that basically summarizes the answer, using AI that's scanning all of these top sources. And that has replaced the blurb. And that people like when Google is gathering whatever response it's going to give you, yes, keywords are a component, but it's looking a lot more holistically for the answer it wants to give you. And that completely changes the architecture of how brands need to present themselves, because brands now need to present themselves to really answer questions rather than just including general terms here and there. So we're in the very early stages of this, but brands really need to think about what are people's actions and behaviors that will ultimately lead them to your site. So if you're, a healthcare AI company and people are saying, how can I speed up the prior auth process? Well, that would be a pretty critical question to answer in full somewhere in your thought leadership content, because that is what Google can pull from for its Gemini output to answer one's question. People going into ChatGPT, totally different story. ChatGPT isn't necessarily citing sources all the time, so you really are in anonymity. That's a big challenge. We're just going to see how the tide continues to shift here. I definitely don't see Google going away anytime soon. But it's just about rethinking the new behaviors that are ultimately able to drive traffic to your own channels.
I mean, we've seen major changes in Google Ads. I don't know if you've looked at the latest conference of Google Ads. I mean, they're really shifting away from keywords now because, we used to optimize for keywords. Now, AI can understand the context much better than just with a certain keyword. So we're looking at themes on subject and content of that nature. So it really boils down to, I think what AI enabled is more specific results. So for example, when you give these models like a context of what exactly you're looking for, and sometimes you can't do that much explanation in Google, in the Google search. And also because AI understand your context and why you're looking into this, and it will give you more specific results. And like, let's say, for example, you're looking for a specific company that does XYZ. If you do it in your traditional Google search, the companies who have optimized the best their websites, who have put a lot of budgets into optimizing those keywords that mentioned in your initial search, will appear on top. But now I think it's a democratizing factor. Now even the upcoming companies, the underdogs, the people who don't have a lot of budgets, if they define their ideal customer profile in a more specific manner and they have targeted them, all their content is about that specific service, specific product, specific ICP. And I think they will have better chances in appearing in the results of these LLMs. So do you think that's going to be the case?
I would certainly say so. I think that you have shared a lot of really valuable info that marketing leaders really need to take into account, in that taking a really holistic look about your ICP, your product/service, and really how you're bridging the gap between one and another. I think that you're also touching on another macro issue that I'm interested to see how it unfolds, because now that basically anyone can operate at a level of scale that they've never been able to operate before. It now continues to push up the challenge, level of difficulty, and scale that anyone needs to operate with in order to remain competitive. So now that everyone can use generative AI, that's just the new standard. Like the level of competition has adopted this technology. And if you're not using it, like, you're way behind. But now that it is an essential tool, it just means that everyone needs to be even more on their game, and that content needs to be churned out even faster, that it's going to have an even shorter shelf life, and that just content teams need to be mindful that they just need to keep cranking out really thoughtful, on-brand, and highly personalized content, which is much easier said than done, even with generative AI. Marketing has become an increasingly challenging landscape with the invention of new technology. Generative AI is no exception, and I think that this is one of the bigger catalysts for making marketing even more competitive than it was previously.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the role of creative? I know that your main focus is B2B SaaS. I come from the industry of ad agencies. So I worked a lot in ad agencies. We produced a lot of beautiful videos with a creative twist, entertaining videos, stuff like that. And I'm always curious on how we can apply this to the corporate world and to B2B marketing. Have you experimented? Because there's a blog that there's a podcast that I listen to. It's called The Death of the Corporate Video. And I really relate to that movement, that we really need to step away from these boring corporate videos with stock footage and, somebody is presenting on the wall and all of that stuff. Do you think we are going into that direction? And how do you see creative works within a B2B environment?
Creative is essential for building a bond between a brand and its audience. So there's a lot of highly subjective, very squishy elements that go into creative that basically establish engagement. Just as you were talking about with these bland corporate videos that use the stock footage, I don't know a single one of those that works or adds any value. What I have seen a lot of success with are animated videos. I've personally run them at every venture I've been a part of in the past few years, and that's a way to make your content highly personalized because you have total control over it, and really engaging. In terms of loud, vivid color, fun actions, making your brand personable and tangible for your audience, especially when you're selling something like AI. In many cases, unless you're in robotics, AI doesn't really take a physical form. So it's really hard to illustrate, your product, your service, but, adding that creative element really personifies your AI, your product, your service for people to see, to feel, to hear, to sense. And creative is so instrumental to bridging that gap and just building that rapport and that engagement. So I would strongly encourage any marketing leader to take creative into not just into account, but really put it on the pedestal that it deserves when it comes to their overall strategy.
Last question for you, Ben. And this is usually I ask these questions, and they're more on the anthropomorphication of that. Anyways, so the question is, do you think that these systems can wake up and have consciousness and stuff like that?
Yes. Sentience is definitely a highly debated topic. The short answer is yes. I think that there is potential, because I think that really AI has just about unlimited potential. I don't necessarily see a Skynet type of situation, or at least I hope there won't be one. But if I had to choose between yes or no, I would say yes.
Or why?
simply because we don't know what the potential is of this technology that we have created. What seemed like overnight, we went from being in a world where people were responsible for creating just about everything to AI all of a sudden being a seemingly magic pill to solve so many of our rudimentary problems. Everything from taking someone's drive-through order at a burger stand to submitting a prior authorization for a heart surgery. I mean, we could have never imagined this reality that we live in, just like 2 years ago. So who knows what it's going to look like 2 years from now, 10 years from now? Do we have the answers? No, but I simply think that is within the realm of possibility for AI to be programmed in a way where it is learning faster than anyone could possibly program it to learn. And that it does, as you say, wake up to understand, a lot of the more philosophical things that are really unique to human mentality.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. I mean, this is as you see in the podcast, I interview a lot of philosophers and people from academia. And a lot of them, they're not aligned with this kind of mindset. I think I agree with you. The realm of possibilities, definitely. I think it's just about how we look at humans. If we look at our brain or our mind as a computational device, then absolutely AI could achieve exactly what we can achieve, because AI is really mimicking the neurons in our brain and how they fire and not fire. So if you look at human beings as a machine, as a perfectly biological machine, not perfectly, but it is great biological machine that it is, then there's no reason why AI wouldn't be able to achieve what we achieve and to have a sense of self and self-awareness and all of that stuff. Now, the people opposing it would say that, no, what we do is very special. Maybe some people believe in God or some sort of religion that empowers us with a spirit that is uniquely human. And for those who you cannot really argue, because this is a set of belief system, but yeah, it's interesting to see how different podcast guests on my channel respond to this question. So I'm grateful to have you. Is there anything I didn't ask you?
I think that we covered just about all of it. And I do appreciate that last note, and that there's certainly no right answer to this question because simply no one knows. And trying to unseat people's deep-rooted beliefs is a hopeless task, and one that, it isn't necessarily worth taking, especially when it comes to topics like this. So I certainly respect, both sides of the issue. And I think it's a really interesting question. I'm glad that you brought it up.
Thank you, Ben.
Great. Thank you.